No husband yet. The words hit harder than the laughter that followed, sharp and effortless, like Ryan had rehearsed them just for this moment. And Emily Carter stood there in a borrowed navy dress that didn't quite fit, fingers tightening around a glass she couldn't afford to refill, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes as the room buzzed with quiet judgment. Chandeliers casting golden light over people who had everything she didn't: stability, status, someone to stand beside them. And for a second, just a second, she felt it, that familiar pressure in her chest, the old voice whispering that maybe they were right. Maybe she was behind, maybe she was less, but she swallowed it down, straightened her shoulders, and walked away without a word, heels clicking against marble like a countdown no one noticed, until the doors closed behind her and the cold night air hit like a reset, sharp, clean, real, the city stretching out in neon reflections and rain-slick streets, her breath visible in the chill. As she exhaled slowly, once, twice, steadying herself because she had rent due in 3 days, 2 shifts tomorrow, and no time to fall apart over people who had already decided who she was. So she stepped forward into the rain, letting it soak her hair, her dress, washing away the noise, until headlights cut through the dark, low and smooth, a black car gliding to a stop just feet away, too quiet, too precise. And before she could step back, the rear door opened and a man stepped out, tall, impossibly composed for someone who immediately faltered. His hand catching the edge of the door like gravity had shifted without warning, and Emily moved without thinking, instinct overriding hesitation as she reached out, catching his arm before he could fall, the contact sending a strange, electric stillness through her chest, like her heartbeat had skipped and restarted in a different rhythm. And up close, he was wrong, not in a way she could name, but in the way his skin seemed too pale. Under the streetlight, almost luminous, his features too sharp, too perfect, his presence heavy in a way that made the air feel thinner, colder, and when his eyes lifted to meet hers, something flickered there, something deep and unreadable, gone as quickly as it appeared, and she heard herself say it, soft, automatic, "You shouldn't be alone like this," the words slipping out before she could second-guess them. Simple, ordinary, and yet the effect was immediate, his entire body going still, as if the world itself had paused, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved, rain falling in steady rhythm around them, until the silence broke not with sound, but with motion, the distant hum of engines growing closer, smoother, controlled. And Emily turned just as more black cars appeared. 1, 2, 5, lining the narrow street with impossible precision, doors opening in perfect sync as figures stepped out, tall, composed, moving with a grace that didn't belong to normal people. And then one of them dropped to one knee, head bowed, voice low but absolute. "My king." And the world tilted just slightly, just enough for Emily to realize that everything she thought she understood about this night, about that man, about herself, had just changed. And the rain kept falling, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment all along. Emily did not move, not when the man beside her straightened slowly, not when the rain seemed to quiet around him, as if even the storm understood something she did not, her fingers still lightly gripping his sleeve before she realized and pulled back, her heart beating too fast, too loud, and the words echoed her mind, "My king," over and over, like something unreal forced into reality. And she looked at him again, really looked this time, at the way the streetlight bent around him instead of touching him, at the stillness in his posture that did not belong to someone who had nearly collapsed seconds ago, at the control in his expression that felt older than anything she had ever known. And then his gaze shifted to her, sharp, focused, and everything else seemed to fade, the cars, the men, the city, until it was just that look, and for a moment she felt exposed, like he could see every struggle, every late-night shift, every quiet moment. She had chosen kindness when no one was watching, and it made her chest tighten in a way she could not explain. But before she could speak, before she could step away, one of the men approached carefully, stopping just short of them, his head still lowered in respect, his voice controlled but urgent. "My lord, the council has been searching for you." And the word council landed heavy, unfamiliar, dangerous, But the man did not respond immediately, his attention still on Emily as if the rest of the world was an inconvenience. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, and carried something that was not quite human. "She stays." And the man hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, before nodding. "As you command." And Emily blinked, confusion cutting through the haze. "Wait, I am not going anywhere," she said quickly, her voice sharper than she intended, pulling her coat tighter around herself as the cold finally reached her skin. "I just helped you. That is all." But he stepped closer, not threatening, not forceful, just certain, and that certainty was more unsettling than anything else. "You did more than that," he said, his eyes searching hers again. And there was something different now, something quieter, almost careful. "You reminded me of something I thought was gone." And the words should not have meant anything, but they did, settling somewhere deep in her chest, unfamiliar and warm. And for a second she forgot the cars, the men, the title they had used, but then another voice broke through, sharper, colder. "A human does not belong here." And Emily turned to see a woman standing near one of the cars, elegant, composed, her gaze fixed on Emily with open disapproval. And just like that, the moment shattered, reality rushing back in waves, and Emily took a step back, shaking her head slightly. "I think you have the wrong idea," she said, forcing steadiness in her voice. "I have work in the morning, I have rent to pay, I do not belong in whatever this is." And for the first time, something flickered across his face, not anger, not amusement, but something closer to realization, like he was seeing the distance between their worlds for what it truly was. And yet, instead of stepping back, instead of letting her go, he extended his hand. Simple, calm, undeniable. "Then let me change that," he said. And the rain picked up again, soft at first, then steady, as if the night itself was waiting for her answer. Emily stared at his hand, at the steady way it remained there between them, unmoving, patient, as if time itself had slowed to wait for her decision. And for a second, everything inside her split in two, one side pulling back, reminding her of early mornings, overdue bills, the life she understood, the other side drawn forward by something she could not name, something quiet but undeniable that had started the moment she touched him. As she shook her head slightly, trying to clear it, "You cannot just change someone's life like that," she said, her voice softer now, but still firm. "You do not even know me." And a faint shift touched his expression. Not offense, not dismissal, but something closer to interest, as if that answer mattered more than anything else she could have said. "I know enough," he replied, his voice calm, certain, and that certainty sent a strange warmth through her chest again, unwelcome but real. And before she could respond, the woman near the car stepped forward, her heels silent against the wet pavement, her presence sharp and controlled. "My king, this is unnecessary," she said, her gaze never leaving Emily. "She is human." And the word landed differently this time, not just a description, but a boundary, a warning. And Emily felt it, the invisible line being drawn around her, defining where she belonged and where she did not. And something in her tightened, not fear, not quite, but a quiet resistance that had been building for years, through every dismissal, every assumption, every moment she had been underestimated. And she lifted her chin slightly, meeting the woman's gaze without stepping back. Then, "I think I should go," she said, her voice steady now, grounded in the only world she knew how to trust. "Whatever this is, it is not my place." And for a brief moment, the street fell silent again, the rain soft against the pavement, the distant city noise fading into the background. And then he moved, not fast, not forceful, just enough to stand between her and the others, a subtle shift that changed everything. "It is your choice," he said, looking at her, not commanding, not insisting, just stating it like a fact. "But understand this," his voice lowered slightly, carrying a weight that made the air feel thinner. "You have already stepped into something that will not simply forget you." And the words settled over her, heavy, real, and she felt it again, that shift, that invisible line she had crossed without realizing. And for the first time, doubt crept in, not about him, not about what he was, but about whether she could truly walk away from whatever this was. And before she could answer, One of the men opened the car door, the interior dim but elegant, a space that did not belong to her world, and the rain grew heavier, soaking through her coat, her hair clinging to her face, grounding her in the present, in reality, in everything she had always known. And yet her eyes returned to him, to the quiet way he waited, not rushing her, not pressuring, just there, as if he had all the time in the world, and maybe he did, and her heart beat once hard, then again slower, steadier, and without fully understanding why, she reached out, her hand hovering for a fraction of a second before settling into his, and the moment their skin touched, everything stilled again, not the world, not the rain, but something deeper, something inside her that recognized this was not just a choice, it was a beginning. The moment her hand settled into his, the warmth was immediate, unexpected, like stepping into a space where the cold could not follow, and Emily inhaled sharply, not from fear but from the strange sense of stillness that wrapped around her, as if the noise of the world had been turned down to something distant and unimportant, and he did not tighten his grip, did not pull her forward. He simply held her hand with a steadiness that felt deliberate, controlled, and that made it harder to let go. Not easier, and without another word, he guided her toward the open car door, the movement smooth, unhurried, as if there was no possibility she would refuse now. And for a brief second, she hesitated at the edge, her reflection faint in the dark glass, rain tracing thin lines down the surface, a blurred version of the life she was leaving behind, and then she stepped inside, the door closing softly behind her with a finality that echoed louder than it should have, and the interior was quiet. Warm, the leather seats immaculate, the air carrying a subtle scent she could not place, something clean, something old, and across from her, he sat with the same composed stillness, his eyes never leaving her face, studying her not with suspicion, not with curiosity alone, but with something deeper, something that made her shift slightly in her seat, aware of every small movement, every breath, and the car began to move, silent, seamless, the city lights slipping past the window in blurred streaks of gold and white, and for a while, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching but not uncomfortable, just heavy like it held words that had not yet been chosen. And finally, she broke it, her voice quieter now, more grounded. "What are you?" she asked, not demanding. Not afraid, just needing something real to hold on to. And he tilted his head slightly, considering her question as if it deserved more than a simple answer. Someone who has existed long enough to recognize something rare when it stands in front of me, he said, and the answer was not what she expected, not direct, not clear, but it settled in her thoughts anyway, lingering, as she looked out the window again, watching the familiar streets fade into unfamiliar ones, taller buildings, quieter, roads a part of the city she had never seen from this angle. And she felt it then, the shift, not just in location, but in everything, like she had crossed an invisible boundary that separated the life she knew from something entirely different, and her fingers curled slightly against her palm, remembering the warmth of his touch, grounding herself in something she could not yet understand. And across from her, he watched her in silence, as if he could see that realization forming, as if he had been waiting for it. And when the car finally slowed, turning through a set of iron gates that opened without hesitation, she leaned forward slightly, her breath catching as the view revealed itself. A structure rising ahead, vast, elegant, lit by soft golden light that reflected off stone and glass, something that felt less like a place and more like a presence. And the car came to a smooth stop, the door opening once more, and for a moment, she remained seated, her heart beating steadily. Now, not with panic, not with doubt, but with something else, something quieter, stronger, and when she stepped out, the rain had already begun to fade, leaving the air cool and still, and he stood beside her again, just as composed, just as certain, and as she looked up at the place in front of her, she understood something she had not fully grasped before. She had not just stepped into his world, she had been brought to its center, and there was no part of this that felt temporary. Emily did not realize she had stopped breathing until the massive doors in front of her opened without a sound, as if the building itself had been waiting for her arrival, and warm light spilled out across the stone steps, soft and golden, washing away the last traces of rain. And she stepped forward slowly, her shoes quiet against the polished floor as she crossed the threshold. The air inside different, still, controlled, carrying a faint scent of something ancient and refined, and the space stretched out before her an impossible scale. High ceilings, long corridors, every surface flawless in a way that felt untouched by time, and yet it was not empty. Figures stood at a distance, dressed in dark, elegant clothing, their posture perfect, their eyes following her with a focus that made her acutely aware of every step she took, and she resisted the instinct to shrink, to lower her gaze, instead lifting her chin slightly, grounding herself in the only thing she could control, her own presence. And beside her, he moved with quiet authority, not needing to speak for the space to respond to him, for the people within it to shift subtly as he passed. And only when they reached the center of the hall did he stop, turning to face her fully, the light catching in his eyes in a way that made them seem almost unreal. And for the first time since she had met him, there was something different in his expression, not distance, not calculation, but intention, clear and undeniable. "This is where I live," he said, the words simple but carrying weight far beyond their meaning. And Emily let out a slow breath, her gaze moving around the room again, taking in the scale, the precision, the quiet power embedded in every detail. "You do not just live here," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension building in her chest. "You rule this place." And a faint shift touched his expression, something close to approval. And before he could respond, the sound of measured footsteps echoed through the hall, drawing her attention to a group approaching from the far end, their presence immediate, commanding, and at their center was the same woman from the street, her gaze sharp, unwavering. "My king," she said, stopping several feet away, her tone controlled but firm. "The council has convened," and the word council settled heavily in the space, altering the atmosphere in an instant. And Emily felt it, the shift, the subtle tightening of the air, the way the others in the room seemed to become more still, more attentive. And he did not look away from her immediately, as if finishing something unspoken, before turning his attention to the woman. "Then they can wait," he said, his voice calm but absolute. And for a brief moment, silence followed, the kind that carried resistance just beneath the surface, and the woman's gaze flicked to Emily again, sharper now, more assessing. "They will not accept this," she said, quieter, but no less certain. And Emily felt those words land directly on her, felt the weight of them settle into her chest, not as fear, but as clarity, because for the first time, she understood that this was not just about him, not just about whatever connection had drawn her here. It was about everything that came with it, everything that stood against it. And she straightened slightly, her voice calm when she spoke. "Then maybe they're not the only ones who get a say." And the words surprised even her, but once spoken, they held steady and real. And for a fraction of a second, something shifted in the room, subtle but unmistakable, as if the balance had moved, just slightly. And he looked at her again, that same quiet intensity returning. But now there was something else beneath it, something that felt almost like recognition. And far across the hall, the doors began to open once more, revealing a darker corridor beyond. And whatever waited there, Emily knew without being told, this was where everything would change. The doors at the far end opened slowly, not with noise, not with force, but with a quiet inevitability that made Emily's chest tighten, as if something unseen had just taken notice of her. And the corridor beyond was darker, lined with tall stone pillars and dim lights that flickered like distant stars, drawing her forward without a word. And for a moment, she did not move, her instincts pulling her back toward the familiar, toward the version of her life that made sense. But then she felt it again, that same steady presence beside her, not pushing, not demanding, just there. And when she glanced at him, his gaze was already on her, calm, unwavering, as if he knew exactly what she was weighing, exactly how far this moment would carry her. And without speaking, He turned and stepped toward the corridor, leaving the choice behind him. And Emily hesitated for only a second longer before following. Her steps slower at first, cautious, then steadier as the distance between them closed. The sound of her shoes echoing softly against the stone, each step pulling her deeper into something she could no longer pretend was temporary. And as they entered, the doors behind them closed with the same quiet finality, sealing off the world she had just come from. And the air shifted, cooler, heavier, filled with a silence that felt intentional. Like this place held secrets that did not belong anywhere else. And they walked side by side. The corridor stretching longer than it should have. The walls lined with carvings too intricate to fully take in at a glance. Symbols and patterns that seemed to move if she looked at them for too long. And her attention flickered between them and him, between the unknown and the only constant she had in this moment. And finally, she spoke, her voice low but steady. "You said they will not forget me." And he did not slow, did not turn. But his answer came without hesitation. "They will not," he said, and there was no warning in it, no attempt to soften the truth, just certainty, and something in her settled at that. Not comfort, but clarity, because at least now she understood that whatever came next would not be something she could simply walk away from. And the corridor opened into a vast circular chamber, its ceiling high above, disappearing into shadow. The center lit by a single ring of soft light that illuminated a long stone table, and figures already seated around it, their presence immediately felt, each one still, composed, their attention shifting toward her the moment she stepped inside, and the weight of it pressed against her, not physical, but undeniable, like standing in front of something ancient that had already decided what she was before she spoke a single word. And she paused at the edge of the light, her breath steady despite the tension building in her chest. And beside her, he stopped as well, his presence altering the room in an instant, the air tightening, the silence deepening. And for a moment, no one spoke, as if even this gathering needed to adjust to the fact that she was standing there. And then one of them leaned forward slightly, their voice smooth, controlled, but carrying a sharp edge beneath it. "So this is the human." And the words were simple, but they echoed through the chamber with a weight that made it clear this was not a question. It was a judgment already forming, and Emily felt it, the line being drawn again, the same one she had crossed outside, now reinforced by something far older, far more powerful. And yet instead of stepping back, instead of shrinking under the attention, she took a single step forward into the light, her shoulders straight, her gaze steady. And in that moment, something shifted again, subtle but undeniable. Because she was no longer just someone who had been brought here, she was someone who had chosen to stand. The silence after she stepped into the light did not break immediately. It stretched thick and deliberate, as if every figure seated around that stone table was measuring her, not just her presence, but her worth, her place, her right to exist in a room like this. And Emily felt it press against her from all sides, a quiet force that would have made her shrink just days ago. But something had shifted, something in the way she had walked into this place, in the way she had chosen not to turn back. And so she held her ground, her chin slightly lifted, her breathing steady even as her pulse beat stronger beneath the surface and across the table. One of them leaned back slightly, their expression unreadable, but their voice precise, controlled. "You stand where centuries of law say you should not." And the words carried no volume, no anger, yet they filled the entire chamber, settling into the stone itself. And Emily did not answer immediately, not because she did not have one, but because she understood now that every word spoken here carried weight far beyond intention. And beside her, he stepped forward just enough to stand fully within the circle of light, his presence altering the balance in an instant, the subtle tension in the room tightening, shifting toward him. "She stand where I allow," he said, and his voice was not raised, not forceful, but it cut through the space with an authority that needed no reinforcement. And for a brief moment, no one spoke, as if even they acknowledged that truth, even if they did not accept it. And then the woman from before stepped forward slightly, her gaze sharp, unwavering. Allowing is not the same as making it right, she said, her tone measured but firm. You know what this means? And there was not just resistance, but something deeper, something rooted in rules older than anything Emily had known. And she felt it again, that invisible boundary pressing against her, defining what she could never be in their world. And yet, instead of stepping back, instead of letting that weight push her into silence, she spoke, her voice calm but clear. Then explain it to me. And the simplicity of it landed harder than any argument, because she was not challenging them, not defying them. She was asking to understand, and that shifted something subtle but undeniable, as if they had expected fear or defiance, but not this. And the same figure who had spoken first leaned forward again, their gaze narrowing slightly. What you represent is instability, they said. A human in this place disrupts balance, tradition, order. And Emily listened, really listened, the words settling into her not as rejection, but as information, as something she could choose to accept or not. As she glanced briefly at him, at the quiet way he watched her, not intervening, not speaking for her, and in that moment, she understood something that grounded her completely. He had brought her here, but he was not here to speak in her place. This was hers to face. And so she turned back to the table, her voice steady, unwavering. Then maybe your balance depends on things that should have changed a long time ago. And the words hung there, not loud, not dramatic, but real. And for the first time since she had entered the chamber, the silence that followed felt different. Not dismissive, not controlled, but uncertain. And that uncertainty spread, quiet but undeniable, because she had not just stood in their space. She had spoken into it. And the world they believed unshakable had shifted, even if only by a fraction. The silence did not break the way Emily expected. It did not explode in an argument or rejection. It shifted slowly, like something ancient adjusting to a pressure it had not felt in a very long time. And for the first time since she had stepped into the chamber, she saw it, not clearly, not fully, but enough hesitation, not from all of them, but from some subtle changes in posture, in gaze, in the way their attention no longer dismissed her outright. And that was when the woman who had spoken before stepped forward into the light, her presence sharper now, more deliberate. Change is not decided by those who do not understand what holds this world together, she said, her voice calm, but carrying a quiet authority that filled the space. And Emily met her gaze without stepping back, because she understood now that this was not about proving she belonged. It was about refusing to disappear. And before she could respond, he moved again, not stepping in front of her, not shielding her, but standing beside her, equal. And that alone shifted the weight of the room. She understands more than you think, he said, his voice low but absolute. And this time, there was no pause, no hesitation. The tension sharpened immediately, as if a line had finally been crossed that could not be undone. And one of the figures at the far end leaned forward, their expression tightening slightly. You would risk the stability of everything for this, they said, not asking but stating, and the word this hung in the air, directed at her, reducing her to a variable, a disruption, something to be managed or removed. And Emily felt it, that old instinct to shrink, to step back, but it did not take hold, because something stronger had already replaced it, something steady and quiet that had been building since the moment she walked away from that laughter earlier that night. And she spoke again, her voice calm, unwavering. You keep saying I am the problem, she said, but none of you have asked why he chose me. And the question landed differently, not confrontational, but precise. And for a moment, no one answered, because it shifted the focus from what she was to why she was there at all. And beside her, she felt the faintest change in him. Not movement, not expression, but something deeper, like recognition, like the answer mattered more than the question itself. And then, finally, the same voice responded, slower this time, more measured. Then answer it, they said, and Emily did not look away, did not hesitate, because the truth was simpler than anything they expected. I did not choose this world, she said. I chose to help someone who needed it. And the words settled into the chamber, quiet but undeniable, cutting through centuries of assumption with something disarmingly simple. And for the first time, the silence that followed did not feel controlled. It felt uncertain, fractured in places that had always been solid. And that was when he spoke again, not to defend her, not to explain, but to end the question entirely. "And I chose her," he said, his voice carrying a finality that left no room for interpretation. And this time, no one interrupted, no one argued. Because the weight of that statement settled deeper than anything else that had been said, and across the table, the woman's gaze hardened slightly, not in anger, but in realization. "Then you understand what comes next," she said quietly, and Emily felt it, the shift, not just in the room, but in everything, because whatever came next was no longer a possibility, it was inevitable. And there was no part of her that felt the same as the girl who had walked into the rain just hours ago. The words settled into the chamber like a final note that could not be taken back. And for a moment, no one moved, no one spoke, as if the weight of what had just been declared needed time to fully exist. And Emily stood there beside him, her heartbeat steady but strong, no longer racing, no longer uncertain, just present, grounded in something she had not known she possessed until now. And across the table, the figures remained still, their silence no longer dismissive, but calculating, as if the outcome they had expected had quietly shifted into something far less predictable. And then, slowly, one of them rose, the movement deliberate, measured, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "Then it will be witnessed," they said, their voice calm but carrying a depth that felt older than the walls themselves. And Emily felt the meaning. Before she fully understood the words, felt the shift from debate to consequence, from question to decision. And beside her, he did not move, did not hesitate, his presence unchanged, as if this had always been the path he intended to take. And the woman who had opposed them stepped forward once more, her gaze no longer sharp with resistance, but steady with something else, something closer to resolve. Once witnessed, it cannot be undone, she said, not as a warning, but as a fact, and Emily drew in a slow breath, the reality of that settling into her, not as fear, but as clarity, because she understood now that whatever came next would not simply change her life, it would redefine it entirely. And for a brief moment, her mind flickered back, not to the chamber, not to the figures watching her, but to the laughter, to the bright lights and easy judgments of a room that had already decided she was less. And something quiet but unshakable settled in her chest. Not anger, not even defiance, but a simple truth she had never fully claimed before, that her worth had never been determined by the absence of someone standing beside her. And now, as she stood here, in a place that should have rejected her completely, she realized something else. She had not been chosen because she lacked something. She had been chosen because she had never lost what mattered. And when she looked at him, really looked this time, she saw it reflected back, not power, not authority, but recognition. And without needing to be told, she stepped forward again, fully into the center of the light, her voice steady when she spoke. "Then let it be witnessed." And the words carried, clear and unwavering. And for the first time, no one questioned them, no one interrupted, because the moment had already moved beyond debate. And as the chamber seemed to shift around her, as the air itself felt different, charged with something ancient and inevitable, she understood that this was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of something far larger than either of them alone. And somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the city, beyond everything she had known before, the world continued as if nothing had changed. But inside this room, everything had, and it would never return to what it had been. Because even the oldest power could not remain untouched by a single act of quiet, unwavering choice. And as the silence finally broke, not with resistance but with acceptance, Emily Carter stood where she had once been told she did not belong. And for the first time, that truth no longer mattered, because she had already become something they could not ignore and something they could not control.